Morant with a running start. Elevate! Dunks! Oh my goodness! Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance. Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. Happy holidays, everybody. I took a week to enjoy the holidays with my kids, with my family. Hopefully you were able to do the same. There's a lot of stuff to go over, though. In the past 6-7 days, lots of things occurring in Grizzlies world. The Grizzlies had their home winning streak snapped against the Clippers last Monday. They then beat the Raptors in a record-breaking victory. They went on the road to play the Pelicans and won, and then they had a showdown with the Thunder, which basically we don't even want to talk about that. Also, the big story is the continued accumulation of injuries, most notably to Ja Morant, who might be looking at possibly significant time missed with his latest shoulder injury. And on top of all of this stuff, there was a attempt, apparently, to acquire Dorian Finney-Smith from the Nets in a trade, but the Grizzlies were rebuffed, and the Lakers got Dorian Finney-Smith. So on today's episode, I'm going to talk about all of that stuff and hopefully still get out of here in about 30 minutes or so, because I know your time is valuable, just like mine is. So anyways, before we get into it, just a thank you to my newest patrons, my supporters over at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Thank you to Harrison Freeland and to Tom, who both stepped up in a big way. Also, thanks to Adam and Michael for supporting. If you want to support this show and get access to the listener Slack channel, if you want to get access to the bonus episode I released on Sunday, you can do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. It's the best way to support this program. Sure, you can subscribe on YouTube or Spotify, write a 5-star review, all that's great. But the best way, go over and make a pledge at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right, a week ago, we were perhaps feeling too confident. I felt like the Clippers game was going to be a good test, but I wasn't overly worried. Classic Keith, classic trap game. The Grizzlies lost a close game to the Clippers. As I pointed out in the previous episode a week ago, the Clippers game was notable because it was a team that had a good defense, and the Grizzlies had not played many games against a team with a good defense, and lo and behold, the Grizzlies had a lot of trouble scoring. They ended up losing the game 114-110, a rare blemish for the Grizzlies in a game where Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. all played. They had a lot of trouble containing Norm Powell. They had trouble with Zubac, who was a monster. Also, the Grizzlies turned the ball over a lot. They shot a hideous percentage. For all of the praise we give the new offense when we're boat racing terrible teams, I think there are reasonable concerns that are raised when you face a good defensive team. Clippers, last I checked, were about the 6th best team as far as defensive rating in the NBA. And you shoot 22 for 57 on 2-pointers in this game. Speaking to the turnovers, 20 turnovers as a team. Ja Morant had 7 turnovers in this game, including one when the game was a 2-point game. Norm Powell put the Clippers up 2, 112-110. The Grizzlies' offensive possession looked like call 12. That was the play call, seemed like. They spaced it out, let Ja go one-on-one. He lost his balance, threw it out to Jaren. He caught it, but landed out of bounds. That was basically the ball game. Ja finished the Clippers game with 7 turnovers. Ja, of course, did not play in the loss to the Thunder. So updating the splits for the season, Ja Morant in losses right now is averaging 5.7 turnovers per game. That's an eye-popping number. Of course, Ja Morant's only played in 6 losses this season. That part's great. 14-6 when Ja Morant plays. Now, of course, we wish he played more. By the way, I saw this on social media. Mark Giannotto points out it's been 2 years, 2 full years since Ja Morant has played 5 straight games for the Grizzlies. That's a bad stat for the Grizzlies. It's a nice find there by Mark. I'm jealous that I did not find it. But the Grizzlies right now, 14-6 when Ja Morant plays, but the splits, 5.7 turnovers per game for Ja in those losses. The total numbers, in those 6 losses, he has 36 assists and 34 turnovers. That's 6 assists per game, 5.7 turnovers per game. Meanwhile, in victories, Ja is averaging 8.7 assists per game and 3 turnovers. So rounded up, 9 assists and 3 turnovers per game in victories, 6 assists, 6 turnovers per game in losses. Now, some of that, I think, it's not necessarily all on Ja Morant. Assists go down when you miss shots. Also, are the turnovers up because the other players aren't able to beat their men? Is it because you're playing better teams who are playing better defense, who aren't just allowing simple back cuts for the easy assists? I don't know. Probably some of that. But right now, those are some striking numbers as far as the disparity for Ja Morant in wins and losses. Also, you look at the fact that, all right, this is another Western Conference team. We've been destroying the East. The Grizzlies are 13-3 against the East. Meanwhile, the loss to the Clippers dropped them to 8-7 against the West. They went on after that Clippers game, of course, to beat the Pelicans, then lose to the Thunder. So the updated conference records, Grizzlies are 9-8 against the West, 13-3 against the East. So you lose to the Clippers. You're disappointed because you felt like that was an actual decent team with a good defense. You wanted to see how you fared, and you did not get what you wanted. Then after Christmas, they have a bounce-back opportunity against the Raptors, and wow, what a game this was. Aesthetically, it looked beautiful on the court. I'm not talking about the style of play. I'm talking about the jerseys. You had the original Canadian teams, the Grizzlies and Raptors, both wearing throwback jerseys. That was pretty sweet. But the Grizzlies set a franchise record by scoring 155 points. The Raptors, by the way, 1-14 on the road this year. But the Grizzlies set all kinds of marks. They set a season high, of course, not just with the points, but a season high with offensive rebounds. They had 24 offensive rebounds in this game. They scored 24 points in the first 5 minutes. They were up to 37 points 9 minutes into the first. They had a 19-point lead in the first quarter. They did give it away. The Raptors came back, got within 1. It was a very ragged end to the first half, but still, into the first quarter was 43-35. Wild numbers. They ended up in the first half setting a season high with 78 points. They led 78-70 in the first half. Season high points scored in a half for the Grizzlies. Season high points allowed in a first half with 70. Then in the third quarter, I think halfway through the third, they were up about 10 or so, but then there was the 3-point barrage. Jalen Wells got on fire. He made several threes. He pushed the lead up to 20 in kind of what felt like the blink of an eye. Then it was, it was 111-91 after Jalen Wells hit his 5th three-pointer of the game. They ended up leading 121-100 after the third quarter. That was a franchise record for the most points scored through 3 quarters. Then, of course, they finished with that franchise record, 155 points. End up winning the game by 29. Some notable performances from that game. You had Zach Edey with a monster game. Zach Edey had 21 points and 16 rebounds. 9 of those rebounds were on the offensive end. A neat stat for the year right now, as far as Zach Edey. The Grizzlies, they're a very good offensive rebounding team this season. Zach Edey is a big part of that. And right now when Zach Edey is on the court, the Grizzlies are rebounding 40% of their misses. A 40% offensive rebound rate. That is a preposterous number. That is so high. That is in the 100th percentile, according to Cleaning the Glass. As a point of comparison, let's look back 2 seasons ago to the Grizzlies' offensive rebound numbers when Steven Adams was on the court. Back then, Steven Adams being on the court meant the Grizzlies got 36.8% of all available offensive rebounds. So right now, with Zach Edey on the court, the Grizzlies are higher than that. So that's a very impressive number and a very impressive game for Zach Edey in this matchup against the Raptors. Also in the game against the Raptors, Jaren was dominant. 21 points, 11 rebounds, his first 20 and 10 game of the season. Also 6 assists and 3 blocks. So despite it feeling ragged at times, I think when you allow 70 points in the first half, you're like, this is not our best performance. Also, we're not playing that good of a team, despite the fact that the Raptors were within an arm's reach midway through the third. When you got to the end of it, the avalanche kept coming, and when you finish winning 155-126, that's an impressive victory right there. Another notable thing from the Raptors game, Santi Aldama hurt himself in this game. He twisted his ankle. This leads into some of our injury issues. Maybe we can hit the injury report right now. So Santi Aldama twists his ankle. He missed the Pelicans game and the Thunder game. His prognosis right now, they say he's week to week. So that injury occurred last Thursday. So hopefully the games this weekend, this upcoming weekend, the Friday, Saturday night back-to-back against the Kings and Warriors, maybe Santi can be available for that game. So Santi, him being out, makes the front line much shallower. We've lost one of our top reserves, a 6th man of the year candidate, possibly in Santi Aldama. Added to the injury report, so Marcus Smart, he had that weird finger injury, 2nd straight year. With the finger injury, he's missed the last several games. The report on Marcus is that he has a partial tear of the proximal extensor hood of the right index finger. I don't know what any of that stuff means outside of right index finger. They say he will be reevaluated in 2 weeks. So Marcus missing time again with what feels like freak finger injuries. So that's not ideal. Meanwhile, Ja Morant against the Pelicans in the follow-up game, second night of a back-to-back after the Raptors game. Ja Morant gets injured in the third quarter running into a Daniel Tice screen. This play was initially called an illegal screen. The Pelicans challenged it. Call was overturned. They said it was a legal screen from Daniel Tice. Seemed like maybe he turned his shoulder into him, but he was definitely there. As a screener, you're allowed to firm up to protect yourself. My confusion over this play, it's not necessarily the call being changed. My confusion over the play was thinking that Ja Morant saw the screen. I thought he saw the screen. I thought he ran into Tice to accentuate the contact, and then he flopped a little bit. I thought he was trying to draw a foul, but he gets hurt. So I'm wrong there. He just ran into the screen very, very hard, gets this shoulder injury, and we're all very concerned about this. Now, the biggest issue, I think, is that this is the same shoulder that was surgically repaired last year that caused him to miss the entire season, essentially. Now, that social media account in street clothes that Jeff Stotts runs, he pointed out the AC joint is not the exact specific part of the shoulder that was repaired last year. And he says that on average, based on his database of NBA injuries, players will miss about 12 days or 4 games with this kind of injury. Now, that's just on average. Ja Morant could miss more. And we do not, as of this recording, I'm recording late morning on December 30th, we don't have an injury update for Ja Morant. I think it's reasonable to expect him to miss 2 weeks based on when the injury occurred. Now, he could, of course, miss much more than that. Some people are trying to connect the tea leaves that if Ja Morant was going to be hurt way worse than that, the Grizzlies would not have made this alleged offer that they did for Dorian Finney-Smith, where they offered their first-round pick. Because they offered, based on the reporting, they offered their 2025, this year's first-round pick. If you think Ja Morant's going to miss 2 months, you might not want to trade this year's first-round pick because you're going to, possibly improve that draft pick. Right now, it's going to be like the 25th pick. If you fall down the standings, it could be like the 20th pick or even higher. So maybe if we want to connect those dots and say, all right, we're not that worried about Ja Morant. But Ja Morant did get hurt against the Pelicans and, of course, missed the Thunder game, robbing that game of a lot of its excitement. A lot of the luster gone with that. But right now the Grizzlies are facing, no Ja Morant for a bit, no Marcus Smart, which we've grown accustomed to, no Santi Aldama probably for the next game at least, and then Brandon Clark missed the Thunder game, and we're still waiting. We're still weeks away from Vince Williams Jr. or Gigi Jackson. Also, I guess added to it against the Thunder, Jake LaRavia twists his ankle at the very end of the game. Jake, by the way, having an awful run of games. The last 3 games for Jake, just bizarrely bad. He'd been playing so well this season. The last 3 games, he's been struggling with turnovers, hasn't been that effective offensively. He actually failed to score against the Pelicans and Thunder. Here's a weird stat. He became the second player in the last 8 seasons to have consecutive games where he had 0 total points and 6 or more turnovers. Stanley Johnson, 2 years ago, was the only other player to do that. But right now, the injury report is long, and we have our fingers crossed as far as what that means for Ja Morant going forward. Now, before Ja got hurt against the Pelicans, he was having a tremendous game. Ja Morant had 24 points in the first half. The Grizzlies scored 74 in that first half against New Orleans, meaning they had 3 consecutive halves where they scored 74 points or more. Against the Raptors, they had 78 in the first half, 77 in the second half. So Ja hit some 3-pointers, was scoring in all manner of ways, had a massive first half. The Grizzlies, I think, made 5 straight 3-pointers in the second quarter. They jumped out to a pretty big lead. They did allow the Pelicans to kind of hang in there for a while. Again, it was turnovers that I would blame for that. There was a big play in the first half, by the way. The Pelicans almost cut it to 1. Trey Murphy had this breakaway dunk, and he just slipped. He just lost his footing somehow. And then Desmond Bane came down and hit a big 3. So that was a big 5-point swing right there. And then the Grizzlies led by 13 at halftime. Second half, the Grizzlies gave up a big run once Ja Morant got injured and left the game. So things look a little bit scary then. The Pelicans, I think, got within 6 or 8, 96-88. Maybe it's the closest they got in the second half until there was a few seconds left. DeJounte Murray made a 3-pointer to cut to 6 with just a few seconds left. We weren't very worried there. But the Grizzlies do take care of business. I mean, the Pelicans have had a horrible season. They have 5 wins all year, but they were mostly, I can't say mostly healthy. They still don't have Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram, but they had a lot of their normal players. Like DeJounte Murray was playing. CJ McCollum had a big game. Trey Murphy was playing. Herb Jones was playing. They had all of those guys. But the Grizzlies get a needed win against a Western Conference foe. Jaren was absolutely the star of this one. I mean, Ja finished with 25 points and 7 assists, was 8 for 11 from the field before leaving with that shoulder injury. But Jaren, 33 points and 7 stocks. That's a remarkable, unbelievable statistical line. Also made 4 3-pointers. So 4 made threes, 5 rebounds, 4 steals, 3 assists, 3 blocks. Incredible performance from Jaren Jackson Jr. Edey, also strong game in the start. 14 points, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks, 1 steal. Desmond Bane, I haven't talked much about him. Desmond has been consistently solid to good for a very long stretch now. Against the Pelicans, he had 18 points, 8 assists, and 4 steals. Against the Thunder, he basically was the only guy to have a good game. Against the Thunder, Desmond had 22 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists. And things are trending up in a big way for Desmond Bane. Right now in the month of December, Desmond is averaging 18 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists per game. His shooting splits 52, 40, 94. Again, 52% field goal percentage with 40% from the three-point line, 94% at the line. Reminder, just if you've forgotten how awful Desmond's numbers were in the month of November, in 8 games in November, he was averaging 11 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists per game on 35, 24, 68 shooting splits. So Desmond has been trending in the right way. Going back to the Pelicans game, the Grizzlies won consecutive games, allowing 120 or more points for the first time in franchise history. That just speaks to the increased scoring, the quick pace, the high pace they're playing with. They haven't had that many games in franchise history where they've allowed that many points in consecutive games, and they usually lose when they do so. Also, the Grizzlies are undefeated this year on the second night of back-to-backs. If you ever criticize the minutes played for the Grizzlies' best players, which I want to do, perhaps you can highlight that stat to say that the minutes distribution is working. The Grizzlies, perhaps in no small part to keeping their minutes low for all of their players, are undefeated, 5-0 on the second night of back-to-backs when teams are usually not that good. So score one for the coaching staff right there. Other things about this game. This game was super long. Maybe this doesn't matter. Maybe this is not basketball analysis. The third quarter had so many free throws and foul calls and reviews, but this was yet another 2-hour and 40-minute game for the Grizzlies. Personally, as someone who covers the NBA and loves the NBA, like, you can have all your ratings talk. I don't care about the ratings. But I do think for the long-term health of the NBA, you probably don't want your games to be as long as NFL games. That's just my thought. Major League Baseball, they are working aggressively, and they have worked aggressively to shorten their games. NFL games do not go over 3 hours. Rarely do they. Having 2-hour and 40-minute NBA games, I don't think is good for the product, probably long-term. But what do I know? Maybe I'm just an impatient older gentleman tired of watching these very long basketball games. So the Grizzlies beat the Pelicans, blow out the Raptors, and then set up this showdown against the number 1 team in the West, the Oklahoma City Thunder. It went horribly, but still, let's talk about that and also this Dorian Finney-Smith business right after this quick break. Okay, so even though the win over the Pelicans put the Grizzlies in second, and you combine it with a Houston loss to the Timberwolves. So even though we knew it was a 1-versus-2 showdown in the West, we already knew going into the game, basically, we were pretty sure Ja Morant was not going to play. And not having Ja and Marcus and Santi Aldama, all right, we were not maybe overly optimistic. I still was very excited, basically until Sunday, when in somewhat surprising fashion, the Grizzlies announced Zach Edey was going to miss the game because he entered concussion protocol. Apparently during the Pelicans game, sometime he got hit. If you saw him on TV, you saw he had a black eye. He had a shiner. So he's not lying. That seems like proof. But he had a black eye, and apparently he woke up with concussion symptoms the day after the Pelicans game. So Zach Edey was a surprise scratch from that one. Meanwhile, Brandon Clark was questionable going into the game, and Brandon Clark doesn't play. And frankly, no Edey, Brandon Clark, no Ja Morant, no Marcus Smart. All of my enthusiasm was lost. However, when the game tipped off, even though we were starting John Conchar at the 4, the Grizzlies started Scottie Pippen Jr., Desmond Bane, Jalen Wells, John Conchar, and Jaren Jackson Jr., once the game tipped off and I found out they were wearing the Red City jerseys, well, all of a sudden I got excited again. The Grizzlies have been undefeated in these jerseys. They had won by an average of 28.5 points per game in the 4 other games where they wore the red Throwback Sounds jerseys. So the Grizzlies wearing the special magical jerseys, they jump out to a 9-0 lead. They led 11-2. I'm getting kind of excited. Then, the wheels completely fell off. The Thunder turned the water off, to use a Grizzlies defensive phrase. The Thunder ran the Grizzlies out of the building. The Grizzlies players did not look like they were in the same league as the Thunder players for about a 15-minute stretch there. I mean, no one on the Grizzlies was in the same league as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And that, frankly, that was super disappointing. Yes, you're super shorthanded, but, you want to see Jaren have a good game. Jaren had one of his worst games of his career. Jaren was getting his shot blocked left and right by Isaiah Hartenstein. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is sunning all of our guards and forwards and blocking all their shots and scoring at will. The Thunder, after falling down 11-2, went on a 72-34 tear. They flipped the score. They scored something like 55 points in 14 minutes against the Grizzlies defense, which is good. I know you're missing Zach Edey. I know you're missing John Morant, but the Grizzlies defense is still good, even when you're missing those players. The final 15 minutes of the first half, the Thunder outscored the Grizzlies. Again, 15 minutes of game time. The Grizzlies were outscored 59-27. The Grizzlies had this 18-game streak of scoring at least 110 points. That fell to the wayside. They could not score. And yes, you were shorthanded. You're not disappointed you lost. I think you are disappointed the manner that you lost. I think you are disappointed how impotent your offense looked. I think you're disappointed when you combine that with the Clippers game. You say the Clippers and the Thunder game. All right. The offense is not getting the shots you need. Of course, we're also starting John Conchar. I'm not getting overly upset by the loss. I didn't expect a victory. By the way, Conchar, Jalen Wells, and Jaren Jackson Jr., our front court combined to go 0 for 18 from the three-point line. Grizzlies were 14 for 51. That's 28% on three-pointers. The Thunder didn't even have a good three-point shooting day. They were 14 for 44. That's just 31.8%. Also, by the way, the Clippers didn't have a good three-point shooting game. They only made 9 three-pointers. The Grizzlies won that three-point battle against the Clippers 16-9. But the Grizzlies turned the ball over a ton. This was one of the top teams in turnovers in the Grizzlies against the best team at forcing turnovers, and we felt it. Scottie Pippen Jr. looked out of his depth trying to play against the Thunder. Scottie only finished with 4 turnovers. I probably would have put his turnover line at 4.5, 5.5. So he only finished with 4, but that's in 24 minutes. He did cobble together 10 points and 6 assists. Jalen Wells looked completely out of his element. Jalen Wells had a horrible game. Missed all 7 of his three-pointers, like I said. Finished 2 for 12 from the field. Conchar at least grabbed a lot of the missed shots in this game. Conchar with 15 rebounds. Of course, that's a season high for him. Jaren Jackson Jr.'s numbers. He finished 3 for 17 from the field. That's the worst field goal percentage Jaren Jackson Jr. has ever had in a game where he attempted at least 15 shots. If you want to do a less round number, it's the worst field goal percentage he's ever had in a game where he's attempted at least 13 shots. His only lower field goal percentage games, when he's taken 10 or more shots, he's had some 2 for 12 games in his career. 3 for 17 for Jaren. Missed all 6 of his three-pointers. Also had 3 turnovers. Had 13 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists. The team just wasn't good enough. The game was over early. And of course, you had to play, like Cam Spencer was the 9th guy in. Cam Spencer had no business being in this game. Cam Spencer, unfortunately, had a fast break where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was back there guarding the rim. I mean, what's Cam going to do? Back it out? He had to try to score, but Shai swallowed that shot. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in this game was incredible. I mean, he had through 3 quarters, had 33.6 assists, 6 rebounds, and 4 blocks. He was amazing. But the Grizzlies just couldn't get it done against this top team in the West. And it's not a referendum on the season because you don't have John Morant, you don't have Santi Aldama, you don't have Zach Edey, so you're missing 2 starters, you're missing 2 of your top bench players. So it's not a referendum on the Grizzlies versus the Thunder, but it is, I think, disappointing when it's like you circle it on your calendar and then all your guys are hurt. And all the guys being hurt, it sort of feels like an intrinsic property of the Grizzlies. This is not an aberration now at this point. I mean, you can call, I think, a lot of the twisted ankles, those are unlucky, bad luck injuries. Santi Aldama not being there, Zach Edey with a concussion, those are bad luck things. Brandon Clark being out with soreness, not really a bad luck thing. That is a feature of Brandon Clark. He misses some games. He fell in the draft because of health concerns. John Morant missing games. Unfortunately, that's a feature of John Morant. I think we have to accept that. That's a feature of John Morant. Marcus Smart missing games. I don't even need to say anything. That's what you signed up for when you traded for Marcus Smart. But right now, the numbers are stark again when you say West versus East, when you say playing a good defense versus not playing a good defense. The Grizzlies right now, in playing top 10 defenses, they're 3-5. It's not horrible because the 3 wins, frankly, are great. You've beaten the Magic, the Celtics, and the Warriors. I mean, you beat the Warriors by 51. That's all good. The 5 losses, top of my head, I think it's the... You also lost to the Warriors, lost to the Mavericks, the Clippers, Thunder, of course, the last week, and you also lost to the Rockets. So those are the 5 losses. Whether or not you want to try to take any conclusions away from the Thunder and the Clippers games against how you think this offense is going to fare, the new offense, how's it going to fare when the games matter against good teams in the postseason, for that, the jury is still out. We don't know. It's still an unknowable thing. I am more of a skeptic. So I'm a doubter thinking I'm not sure it's going to work in the playoffs, in a playoff series. I'm not sure I trust that guys like Jalen Wells and Scottie Pippen Jr. and Jay Huff, those guys can have advantages on their opponents when you play the better teams. Like in this game, you saw Jalen Wells when he's isolated on his man. You saw Jake LaRavia struggling once again, isolated on his guy, which is the feature of the offense. The offense is trying to get one-on-one space so you can beat your guy one-on-one and create an advantage. I saw players unable to do that against the Thunder's defense. I saw a lot of dribbles being taken away from the Grizzlies. So I don't know. For that, it's still an unanswered question. We did not get any answers. Going forward, will we get more answers? The Grizzlies are on this road trip right now. You play at the Suns on Tuesday, and then Friday and Saturday, back-to-back games against the Kings and the Warriors. Now, none of those teams are in particularly good form, to borrow a soccer term. The Suns, Devin Booker's injured, Grayson Allen's injured, Yusuf Nurkic is suspended for the game on Tuesday. So, I mean, again, fingers crossed, we don't have to face a full-strength Suns team. The Kings have lost, I believe it's 6 straight now. They fired Mike Brown, their coach. They're not playing super well. The Warriors are up and down. Got a good defense, but we just beat them by 51. So who knows? But still, these road games against the West have been the problem. The Grizzlies' road record right now against the Western Conference are 3-6. So room for improvement. You have tough games coming up. And then also, by the way, after this road trip, you have to play the Mavericks, Rockets, and Timberwolves. So the next 6 games for the Grizzlies, all Western Conference, you're on a Western Conference tear right now. You padded your record against the East. Now you got to play the Suns, the Kings, the Warriors, the Mavericks, the Rockets, the Timberwolves. These are true tests coming up for the Grizzlies. By the way, here's some random stats. I didn't highlight a lot of the specific games with the detail that I normally would. Here's some other things I'm thinking about. So Brandon Clark in the loss to the Clippers only played 6 minutes. This raises my eyebrows. Why are we only playing Brandon Clark 6 minutes in a game? Say he didn't match up well against Zubac. Couldn't guard or something. Didn't think this was the matchup for him. Okay, that's fair. Well, no one else looked that great either. And you lose the game with Brandon Clark only playing 6 minutes. Then Brandon had some, solid games against the Raptors and the Pelicans. Then Brandon's hurt, doesn't play against the Thunder. Now, here's a striking stat. This season, if Brandon Clark plays 15 minutes in a game, at least 15 minutes in a game, the Grizzlies are 18-3. If Brandon Clark plays less than 15 minutes or does not play, the Grizzlies are 3-8. Okay, that's the stat that I consider to be stunning without context. That 3-8 number, they're 0-2 when Brandon Clark doesn't play, 3-6 when he plays less than 15 minutes. You could say when the Grizzlies are winning, they just let Brandon Clark play more. That's fair. If you look at it game by game in the game log, it isn't necessarily that. That's a little bit of it, but usually he's playing heavier minutes in the first halves of these games. You might say just when you play better teams, they go into it with the strategy of limiting his minutes. Thus, the games where he plays limited minutes, you're already playing harder teams. That's why the record is much worse. That could be correct. The game log, that kind of checks out. My question, as a big believer in Brandon Clark, is why don't we trust Brandon Clark against good teams? I know he can't shoot. I know he's undersized, but he's a good player. And I'm confused why I go away from him. So that's a very notable stat. Now, another stat before we talk, I guess I'll close the show with talk about the Dorian Finney-Smith situation. But another stat that I've been monitoring, I've gotten really maybe obsessed with in the last week. It's about Luke Kennard. All right, Luke Kennard had a season-high 16 points against the Thunder. I saw some report saying one of the bright spots of the game against the Raptors is Luke Kennard really found his footing. That really bugged me. Here's what I'm talking about. Luke Kennard's, yes, season-high 16 points against the Thunder. He scored 10 of those points. He took most of his shots in the fourth quarter, when the game was completely over. You were down by 28 going into the fourth quarter. And Luke's like, all right, now it's my time to get my shots off. I've been texting with some Grizzlies people, just joking around about, hey, have you noticed that Luke doesn't shoot much until the team's up 20? Now, I don't know how to search specifically for I want to know his stats when the score's within 15. Because it feels like he's not shooting that much when the game is still in balance. Now, against the Pelicans, he did, to his credit, make 2 threes in the first quarter. Great stuff right there. But his 3 highest scoring games of the year had a season high on Sunday, humiliating loss to the Thunder. He had 16. His second highest scoring game was the 15-point game he had against the Warriors, where you won by 51. He scored 12 of his 15 points in the fourth quarter. The Grizzlies were up 50 going into the fourth quarter. And now Luke's like, all right, I'm going to score now. Now, it makes sense that he has to score playing with they cleared the bench. He's the best player on the court. He's going to shoot. That's fine. I'm more concerned with the fact that he's not having high scoring games in the games that matter, in the games that aren't already decided. All right. His other highest scoring game of the year, he also scored 15 points in the Raptors win. The 155-point game. He scored 12 of his 15 points in the fourth quarter. The Grizzlies were up 21 points going into that fourth quarter. So I don't know why this is getting under my skin, but I feel like it is a little bit. Maybe it was him doing 16 minutes of cardio against his former team, the Clippers. He didn't take a shot against the Clippers. He did take one heave after the buzzer, but he didn't take a shot in the loss against the Clippers, a close game. Meanwhile, all right, now we're up by a bunch against the Raptors. Oh, now he's shooting in the fourth quarter. I just thought it was funny. His 3 highest scoring games, he has 16 points, 15 points, and 15 points. So that's a total of 46 points, and 34 of them have come in the fourth quarter when the game's already decided. He has 9 double-digit games this season. 5 of them have come in a game where the Grizzlies either won or lost by 24 or more. Luke has only made more than one three-pointer in 11 games this season. He's only appeared in 21 games. That's his own issue. But he's only made more than one three-pointer in 11 games. 5 of those games, again, decided by 24 or more points. So, I don't know. I wish he did more in the games that matter. Now, I guess you could push back and say, did Luke making three-pointers help them get to these blowouts? No, I've already pointed it out. I actually looked at all of these. In all of these games, he's not scoring in the first half. All of his scoring comes when the game's already over. And again, part of that is he just plays like 1 8-minute stint when maybe the game's in the balance. But still, Luke has not had an amazing season. He had a really good stretch of games early on there where he was doing a lot of good playmaking, but recently, not so much from Luke Kennard. Hasn't been a big factor for this year. And also, he was involved in this Dorian Finney-Smith trade rumor. By the way, my goals of making this episode 30 minutes long completely failed. So there was a report a few days ago that the Grizzlies were very close to acquiring Dorian Finney-Smith. I did talk about this briefly on the bonus episode I did at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast on Sunday. The rumored offer the Grizzlies made, they offered their first round pick for this year, top 15 protected, and Luke Kennard and John Conchar for Dorian Finney-Smith and second round considerations. Now, I called this offer too good to be true for the Grizzlies on my bonus episode. The reason being, getting rid of John Conchar's salary and trading Luke Kennard is that's no value to the incoming team. John Conchar, who has 2 more years in his deal after this season, is negative salary. That's negative salary for the Nets. And I see fans upset that the Grizzlies offered a better asset than whatever the Lakers offered. I don't know if that's true, first of all. Is D'Angelo Russell worth more than the 22nd or 24th or 5th pick in this year's draft? Possibly. I know D'Angelo Russell on an expiring deal isn't that appealing to teams, but it's worth something. It's better value than Luke Kennard and John Conchar. Also, if the Grizzlies were getting a second-round pick back, it wasn't going to be the Nets' own pick. The Nets aren't trading you the 35th pick for the 25th pick and also taking John Conchar from you. That's a bad deal for the Nets. It's an amazing deal for the Grizzlies, which, again, is why it didn't happen. You would have to pay to get off of John Conchar's salary. So even if you offered the Nets your first-round pick, top 15 protected, the Nets are thinking, well, we have to carry this bad salary for the next 2 years, and you're asking us to move up 10 picks? That's nothing. Also, they knew for a team obsessed with not paying the luxury tax for the Grizzlies, there's an argument getting multiple second-round picks is more valuable to them salary-wise than having a first-round pick. The Grizzlies have done amazingly well at drafting in the second round the past 3 seasons, of course. Jalen Wells, G.G. Jackson, Vince Williams Jr. So I'm not surprised the Nets said no thank you. I mean, I like Dorian Finney-Smith. I've talked about him many times on Grits and Grinds episodes. I've put him in the YouTube thumbnail art twice in the past 18 months because I thought he was a worthy trade target for the Grizzlies. I would have been excited if they pulled off that trade because, again, like I said, it's an amazing deal for the Grizzlies. You're turning in a neutral value guy, Luke Kennard expiring. I mean, he has very little value to other teams. I don't think he's necessary to the Grizzlies right now. He's more necessary if Ja Morant and Marcus Smart are going to be hurt. I mean, maybe they didn't want to up their offer because they're like, listen, we're going to be without Marcus and Ja for several games. We don't want to lose these games. Maybe that's a reason why they didn't up their offer. But I don't think this was a very aggressive offer from the Grizzlies. I think getting off of Luke and John Conchar was a benefit to the Grizzlies, and the Nets are thinking, well, why would we give you a good player in Dorian Finney-Smith and then also, get a late first-round pick? Could the Grizzlies have offered a future pick, like a 2026 top 15 protected? That's a little bit more valuable. I mean, the Grizzlies already off to a great start this year. I think that pick would hold more value for the Nets. Would the Grizzlies just accept getting back the second-round pick they traded the Nets to get rid of Zaire Williams? Maybe that would have made more sense, but the Grizzlies didn't feel comfortable being that aggressive for Dorian Finney-Smith. I don't know. Frankly, I don't have a strong opinion, honestly, whether they should have been more aggressive to acquire Dorian Finney-Smith. Like the Nets right now could honestly flip maybe D'Angelo Russell for something else. I mean, weirdly, seems like the Timberwolves could use a reunion there. They need some guards. Mike Conley's struggling out there. I don't know if a reunion would be something they'd go for. But I understand the Nets turning down the Grizzlies' reported offer. I don't think the Grizzlies' reported offer was that strong. I think it would have been a huge home run victory for the Grizzlies getting off of Kennard and Kennard's salary and bringing in a useful player in a different position. So I'm not like upset the Grizzlies didn't complete this trade. I mean, I want the Grizzlies to make an aggressive offer, trade Marcus Smart for Cam Johnson. I think Cam Johnson is a perfect fit for the Grizzlies. I think Cam Johnson is an aggressive offensive player. He's an amazing shooter. He's got great size. I think he's perfect for your locker room. I don't think Marcus Smart, even when healthy, is going to give you the same things that Cam Johnson can. I mean, the Grizzlies' postseason success for me, it's all based on John Morant being healthy. Those guys are healthy. We don't need Marcus Smart playing that many minutes. We need Cam Johnson playing Jalen Wells' minutes, I think, when the going gets tough. I've seen Jalen Wells on the road against good Western Conference teams and has not been good so far. Jalen Wells is having a tremendous season. I'm excited about Jalen Wells being a difference-making 3-and-D player for many years to come. I want to win this season, and if you could make an aggressive offer using draft picks, using Marcus Smart's salary to get Cam Johnson, I'm in. So I'm not broken up about not getting Dorian Finney-Smith. I totally get it. I think the Lakers' offer was better. So I guess that's my quick analysis of that. And with that, perhaps the longest episode of the season. You are welcome. Anyways, thank you everybody for being a supporter of this show. Again, if you want to get bonus content, do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. Have a great New Year's. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.